Chief Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the window of her office aboard Harmony Station, watching the endless dance of starships against the backdrop of swirling nebulae. Her reflection showed a woman who hadn't slept in 3 standard cycles, dark circles under her eyes matching the depths of space before her. The latest directive from the Galactic Assembly lay on her desk, its holographic text casting an accusatory blue glow across the room. They want us to what? Lieutenant James Harrison's voice cracked with disbelief as he read the document for the 3rd time. Apparently, Sarah replied, maintaining her diplomatic tone despite the absurdity, all human representatives must now communicate exclusively through interpretive dance while standing on one leg during official sessions. The Assembly claims it will reduce the unpredictability of human verbal patterns. The directive was just the latest in a series of increasingly bizarre regulations aimed at controlling humanity's chaotic influence on galactic society. Last week, they'd mandated that all human ships must be painted in colors visible only to species that could see in the ultraviolet spectrum, with warning labels reading, "Caution, contains humans, may react unpredictably to logic." James picked up his datapad, scrolling through the morning's reports. The ZX-Thuli are demanding we stop breathing so rhythmically. They say it's disrupting their quantum harmonics. He paused, double-checking the text. And the Moravian Collective has filed a formal complaint about humans' habit of naming their ships after historical puns. Sarah turned from the window, her weathered diplomatic mask cracking slightly as she smiled. Did they specifically mention the HMS Bodie McBoatface 3? It's actually about the new research vessel. What could possibly go wrong? James couldn't hide his grin. Apparently, it's causing widespread anxiety among precognitive species. The humor faded as Sarah's terminal chimed with another priority message. The Galactic Assembly had scheduled an emergency session at what they knew was 3 a.m. Earth Standard Time, naturally. The topic, addressing the human tendency to find humor in inappropriate situations, including but not limited to bureaucratic proceedings, existential threats, and Monday mornings. Sarah dropped into her chair, the smart fabric conforming to her tension-locked muscles. On her desk sat a small terrarium containing Harold, a perfectly ordinary potted cactus that had somehow become the subject of 3 interstellar diplomatic incidents. It had started when she'd mentioned during a session that humans often talked to their plants. The resulting panic had led to a 6-month study on potential human telepathic abilities and a ban on unauthorized botanical communication. "They're afraid of us, James," she said quietly, gently touching Harold's pot. "Not because we're powerful or aggressive, but because we make no sense to them. We're the only species that looks at the fundamental laws of the universe and says that's more of a guideline, really." The terminal chimed again. The Arthropodian Concordat was demanding an investigation into the human practice of deliberately consuming neurotoxins for pleasure. Sarah had made the mistake of introducing their ambassador to coffee last month. "Did you see the latest regulations for human cargo ships?" James asked, trying to lighten the mood. "All human vessels must now carry a certified chaos mitigation officer, usually a very confused alien whose job is to say that seems inadvisable at regular intervals." Sarah was about to respond when the station's AI interrupted with its pleasantly neutral voice, "Attention all human personnel. As per Regulation 47B, subsection Theta, all human laughter must now be scheduled at least 3 standard cycles in advance. Please submit Form XJ279 application for spontaneous joy expression to your local bureaucratic office. Note, emergency chuckles may be permitted with proper documentation." That was the moment something snapped. Not loudly, not violently, but with the quiet certainty of a species collectively reaching the same conclusion at once. Sarah looked at Harold the cactus, then at James, and finally at her reflection in the window. Her diplomatic mask dissolved into something far more dangerous, a smile that suggested she had just figured out exactly how to use the Assembly's own rules against them. "James," she said, her voice carrying the weight of a decision that would reshape galactic society, "get me the contact details for every human embassy in the galaxy. And find out how many copies of Form XJ279 we can submit before their system crashes." "All of them?" James asked, already knowing the answer. All of them. In triplicate. In every known language. Including interpretive dance. She picked up her datapad and began typing. It's time to show them just how predictably unpredictable humanity can be. They want organization? Sarah continued, her smile growing wider. Let's give them organization they'll never forget. Get me the logistics team. We're going to schedule every single human activity for the next standard year. Every sneeze, every hiccup, every random humming of ancient Earth songs. Through the window, a human transport ship drifted past, its hull freshly painted with regulation-compliant ultraviolet paint. Someone had added a new ship name in perfectly filed paperwork, malicious compliance. The game was about to change, and the galaxy wasn't ready for what happened when humans decided to follow every single rule, exactly to the letter. After all, what's more chaotic than perfect order? As Sarah began drafting what would become known as the So You Want Predictability initiative, Harold the cactus sat silently in his pot, unaware that he would soon become a symbol of peaceful botanical resistance across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. The humans were about to demonstrate why Be Careful What You Wish For was about to become the galaxy's most important lesson in xenodiplomacy. Admiral Marcus Hayes stood on the bridge of the HMS Deliberate Mistake, watching as his fleet of 50 human vessels arranged themselves into a perfect geometric pattern that would give any space traffic controller a headache. Each ship was meticulously painted in regulation-compliant ultraviolet paint, with the addition of precisely calibrated glitter that technically met the reflective surface requirements while being incredibly distracting. Status report on Operation Chaos Theory, he commanded, fighting to keep his face neutral as the reports came in. Lieutenant Commander Priya Patel, his chief of operations, couldn't quite hide her grin as she responded. Sir, all ships have successfully filed their flight plans. All 47,892 of them. For today. Only 47,892? Hayes raised an eyebrow. Well, sir, we had to account for possible quantum fluctuations in our trajectory calculations. As per Section 7, Paragraph 18 of the new Galactic Assembly Regulations, we're required to file separate flight plans for every possible quantum outcome. Priya's eyes sparkled with mischief. We've also submitted contingency plans for solar winds, cosmic ray interference, and the statistical probability of being delayed by space geese. Space geese aren't real, Commander. Yes, sir. We've filed the appropriate paperwork to confirm their non-existence in triplicate. The forms are pending review by the Department of Hypothetical Xenofauna. The bridge crew maintained their professional composure, though Hayes noticed several officers suddenly developing suspicious coughing fits. On the main view screen, the Galactic Assembly's central processing station was visible, a massive structure shaped like a filing cabinet because, as the bureaucratic species insisted, form should follow function. And the special cargo? Hayes asked, glancing at the manifest on his tablet. All properly documented, sir. Every ship is carrying exactly 1 human sock. Left socks only, as regulations don't specifically mention sock laterality. Each sock has been classified as a potential cultural artifact requiring individual environmental impact assessments. The plan was beautiful in its simplicity. Humanity had learned that the galaxy feared their chaos, their unpredictability. So they would give them order, perfect, precise, overwhelming order. A communication request flashed on the main screen. It was from Ambassador Chen's office on Harmony Station. Hayes accepted the call, and Sarah Chen's image appeared, looking entirely too pleased with herself. Admiral, I trust Operation Chaos Theory is proceeding according to schedule? Down to the picosecond, Ambassador. Though I must say, the Arthropodian Concordat is getting suspicious about our punctuality. Sarah's smile widened. Excellent. I've just finished submitting our latest batch of cultural activity permits. We've registered every possible variation of humming "Never Gonna Give You Up" as a protected cultural expression. The forms include 7,419 pages of historical context, including a full analysis of what it means to be Rick-rolled. How did the assembly respond? Their processing systems are beginning to show signs of strain. Apparently, they never expected anyone to actually use all 37,844 subcategories in the cultural expression documentation forms. She paused, checking something off-screen. Oh, and Harold the cactus has been officially registered as a diplomatic auxiliary. He's now entitled to his own office and staff. Hayes couldn't help but chuckle. How did you manage that? Form 89X clearly states that any entity capable of contributing to interspecies understanding qualifies for diplomatic status. I submitted 300 pages of documentation on how Harold helps me understand the universe through photosynthesis-based meditation. A new alert flashed on Hayes's console. The Galactic Assembly was requesting confirmation of their flight paths, all 47,892 of them. Individually. Time to implement Phase 2, Sarah said, her expression turning serious. Is your crew ready? Hayes looked around his bridge. Every human officer was maintaining perfect posture, their uniforms precisely pressed, their expressions professionally neutral. They were the picture of military discipline. It was terrifying. We're ready, Ambassador. Commencing synchronized efficiency in 3, 2, 1. Across the galaxy, every human ship simultaneously began broadcasting their status reports. In perfect unison. Using exactly 17 different communication protocols. Each transmission precisely formatted and timestamped. The data streams were flawless, meticulously organized, and absolutely overwhelming in their volume. Sir, Priya reported, the Assembly's processing station is reporting a 300% increase in efficiency-related anxiety. Excellent. Prepare for Phase 3, initiate the synchronized lunch break protocol. The crew nodded solemnly. According to recently filed regulations, all human crews were required to take designated meal breaks at specific times to prevent chaotic eating patterns. No one had expected them to actually coordinate every single human ship to break for lunch simultaneously, leaving hundreds of perfectly filed departure requests pending. As Hayes watched the organized chaos unfold, he received another message, this one from Dr. Olivia Santos, head of the Human Cultural Exchange Program. Her latest project, Understanding Human Interpretive Dance as a Form of Mathematical Expression, had just been approved for galaxy-wide implementation. The revolution wouldn't be chaotic. It would be perfectly, precisely, overwhelmingly organized. And somewhere in the depths of space, a very confused alien bureaucrat was about to receive 47,892 requests for clarification on the proper filing procedure for classifying a sock as a historical artifact, all scheduled to arrive at exactly 4:42 p.m. Galactic Standard Time. The game was changing, and humanity was playing by all the rules, every single one of them, simultaneously. After all, what could be more chaotic than absolute perfect order? Dr. Olivia Santos stood in the Grand Lecture Hall of the Galactic Cultural Exchange Center, surrounded by holographic displays of Earth's greatest contradictions. On one screen, cats knocked objects off tables, for no apparent reason. On another, a compilation of humans saying "I'm fine" while clearly not being fine played on loop. The gathered alien dignitaries watched with a mixture of horror and fascination. Today's lecture, Olivia announced with perfect academic gravity, will explore the human cultural phenomenon known as doing it for the vine, a historical practice that perfectly encapsulates our species' approach to risk assessment. The hall was packed with representatives from across the galaxy, all required to attend under the new Mandatory Understanding of Human Behavioral Patterns initiative that Sarah Chen had somehow pushed through the Assembly's own bureaucracy. In the front row, a cluster of logical absolutists from the Silicon Consciousness were already showing signs of processing distress. Let's begin with a comparative analysis of human decision-making protocols, Olivia continued, pulling up a new hologram. As you can see, while most species use a linear progression from thought to action, humans employ what we call the hold my beer algorithm. A hive mind representative raised several appendages. Query: what is the logical purpose of holding one's fermented beverage before attempting a potentially dangerous action? Excellent question, Olivia beamed. This brings us to today's practical demonstration. She gestured to her assistant, Dr. Raj Patel, who wheeled in a shopping cart. We'll now demonstrate the human concept of speed running everyday tasks. The assembled aliens watched in mounting anxiety as Raj proceeded to organize his desktop workspace with impossible efficiency, completing a week's worth of paperwork in minutes while maintaining perfect compliance with all 7,892 workplace organizational regulations. Note, Olivia commented, how Dr. Patel is following every single rule, guideline, and suggested best practice simultaneously. This is what we call malicious productivity. In the back of the hall, several members of the Bureaucratic Efficiency Council began to emit distress pheromones. One of them was frantically calculating the implications of humans applying this approach galaxy-wide. But that's just the beginning, Olivia continued, changing the display. Let's discuss the human concept of memes as a form of information transmission. Particularly, the phenomenon known as trolling. She pulled up an image of Harold the cactus, now famous across 3 spiral arms as the first plant to achieve diplomatic status. This simple xerophytic life form has generated more paperwork than the last 3 galactic peace treaties combined. Not because we had to, but because we could. The lecture continued for hours, each segment more precisely documented than the last. Olivia had filed separate cultural significance assessments for every slide, including a 400-page analysis of why humans say "ope" when passing each other in corridors. Meanwhile, across the station, her team of cultural specialists was implementing Phase 3 of their plan. Every human station and ship began broadcasting educational content, perfectly legitimate documentaries about Earth culture that somehow raised more questions than they answered. And now, Olivia announced, reaching the crescendo of her presentation, we will demonstrate the human art of group projects. She revealed a massive organizational chart showing how every human in the galaxy would be participating in a synchronized demonstration of workplace efficiency protocols. The logical absolutists in the front row were now visibly glitching, their crystal matrices struggling to process the concept of organized chaos. One of them had begun reciting prime numbers in a desperate attempt to find patterns in human behavior. For homework, Olivia concluded with a serene smile, please submit a comprehensive analysis of why humans invented small talk about weather, despite having climate control technology. Your reports will be reviewed by Harold the Cactus's newly appointed administrative staff. As the shell-shocked delegates filed out, Olivia received a message from Admiral Hayes, Phase 3 was complete. Every human ship in the galaxy had just submitted requests for cultural exhibition permits. They were going to demonstrate Earth sports. All of them. Simultaneously. Including competitive cheese rolling. The message included a postscript from Ambassador Chen. The Assembly just received our application to classify malicious compliance as an official art form. Attached are 12,000 pages of supporting documentation, including a theoretical framework for quantifying the artistic value of bureaucratic overflow. Olivia smiled as she watched the Bureaucratic Efficiency Council members outside her office attempting to process what they'd just witnessed. One of them was creating new forms to document their confusion, only to realize this too was now classified as a performance art piece. In her office, a small monitor showed feeds from across the galaxy. Humans everywhere were being precisely, meticulously, overwhelmingly normal. They filed their paperwork on time. They followed every regulation. They documented everything in excruciating detail. It was the most unsettling thing the galaxy had ever witnessed. Meanwhile, Harold the Cactus had just been nominated for a Galactic Excellence in Documentation Award. His submission was a 10,000-page thesis on photosynthesis as a metaphor for bureaucratic growth, co-authored by every human child's pet rock. The revolution continued, one perfectly filed form at a time. Deep within the Galactic Assembly's central processing station, Junior Administrative Assistant Cracks of the Bureaucratic Efficiency Council was having an existential crisis. Their filing tentacles trembled as they reviewed the latest batch of human submissions, each document more perfectly formatted than the last. The humans had discovered Regulation 7249X subcategory Omega, which stated that any species could request a review of their classification in the galactic database. They were now submitting individual applications to classify every human activity as a separate subspecies. Homo sapiens caffeinatus had already been approved, followed by Homo sapiens procrastinatoris and Homo sapiens meetingus interruptus. On level 47, where the Emergency Response Processing Unit resided, Senior Coordinator VTHX was watching their holographic displays with mounting horror. Every human ship in the galaxy had simultaneously requested emergency maintenance checks. Each request was valid, urgent, and filed with impeccable documentation. The fact that they all concerned the proper functioning of their ship's coffee makers was technically irrelevant. "They can't keep this up forever," VTHX muttered, their regulatory glands secreting anxiety management fluid. "No species can maintain this level of organizational perfection." As if in response, their terminal chimed with a new alert. The humans had just submitted a 10,000-page proposal to standardize the standardization procedures for standardizing regulatory standards. The document included 500 appendices, each containing fractal subdivisions of increasingly specific rules about making rules about rules. Meanwhile, in her office aboard the HMS Deliberate Mistake, Commander Lisa Wong, newly appointed head of Strategic Compliance Engineering, was putting the finishing touches on Phase 4. Her team had spent weeks analyzing every regulation, directive, and guideline ever issued by the Assembly. They weren't looking for loopholes, they were looking for overlaps. "Send in the next wave," she commanded, her voice carrying the weight of carefully calculated chaos. Operation Infinite Loop is a go. Across the galaxy, human representatives began submitting simultaneous requests for clarification on contradictory regulations. If Directive A required all ship corridors to be painted in calming colors, but Regulation B mandated high-visibility warning shades, which took precedence? The resulting discussion required 17 subcommittees and generated enough paperwork to fill a small moon. In the Galactic Assembly's main chamber, Ambassador Chen was delivering what would become known as the "actually," according to paragraph 7, speech. She had discovered that the Assembly's own charter, written 10,000 years ago, included a clause about the right of any species to express their natural organizational tendencies. Therefore, she concluded, reading from a document longer than the combined works of Shakespeare, humanity's natural tendency toward controlled chaos must be protected under galactic law. "I have prepared a mere 47,000 pages of supporting evidence, each requiring individual review and stamping in precisely 17 locations." The chamber erupted in carefully regulated pandemonium. The logical absolutists were now running probability calculations so complex they had begun to achieve quantum uncertainty. The hive mind collective had splintered into subspecialties, each trying to process a different aspect of human efficiency. Back at the Cultural Exchange Center, Dr. Santos had introduced a new course, Understanding Human Meeting Dynamics, a study in scheduled spontaneity. The highlight was a live demonstration of humans scheduling meetings to discuss the scheduling of future meetings about meeting schedules. Harold the Cactus, now serving as Earth's Assistant Deputy Director of Photosynthetic Affairs, had his own office complete with a waiting room where other plants could schedule appointments to photosynthesize collaboratively. His latest memo on the regulatory implications of growing slightly to the left had spawned 37 new bureaucratic departments. Commander Wong's magnum opus was about to be unveiled. She had discovered that according to the oldest assembly regulations, any species could declare their administrative procedures a protected art form. Humanity was about to classify their entire civilization as one enormous performance piece titled Malicious Compliance, a study in bureaucratic ballet. The revolution had reached its tipping point. In their desperate attempt to contain human chaos through regulations, the Assembly had created the perfect weapon, a species that could weaponize order itself. As Junior Administrative Assistant Cracks watched their perfectly organized world crumble under the weight of human efficiency, they received one final notification. Every human in the galaxy had just submitted individual applications to classify their personal interpretation of the word "actually" as a unique cultural artifact requiring separate documentation. The forms were all different, yet somehow identical, each one more perfectly compliant than the last. And somewhere, in the vast digital archives of the assembly, a single file appeared, a comprehensive analysis of the sound OPE as a quantum superposition of social interactions, Volume 1 of 42,897. The bureaucratic revolution wasn't just succeeding, it was being filed, stamped, indexed, briefed, debriefed, and numbered. The galaxy would never be the same, and there were forms to prove it. The Galactic Assembly's emergency response chamber had never been this full. Representatives from every major species crowded the vast hall, their collective anxiety manifesting in a variety of species-specific ways. The crystalline collective was vibrating at frequencies that threatened to shatter the windows. The hive-mind empaths had merged into one massive consciousness of pure bureaucratic panic. High Counselor ZXYLTH, leader of the Assembly's Executive Committee, stood at the podium trying to maintain order. Their chromatophores were cycling through colors not seen since the great paperwork crisis of the Third Epoch. The situation has become untenable, they announced, tentacles trembling. The humans have achieved what we thought impossible, they have weaponized perfect compliance. The holographic displays around the chamber told the story. Every human vessel, station, and colony was operating at peak efficiency. They followed every regulation, filed every form, and documented every action with terrifying precision. The result was bureaucratic gridlock on a galactic scale. Ambassador Chen sat in the human delegation section, calmly knitting what appeared to be an infinity scarf. The pattern, she had carefully documented, represented the endless loop of regulatory compliance in three-dimensional spacetime. She had already submitted the design for classification as both an art form and a mathematical proof. Perhaps, ZXYLTH continued, if we implement Emergency Protocol Omega-7. Point of order, Chen interrupted, setting down her knitting. According to Section 947, Subsection Theta of the Emergency Protocols Charter, any new emergency measures must be reviewed by all affected species. I have prepared detailed impact assessments for each proposed regulation's effect on every registered human activity, including but not limited to breathing, blinking, and spontaneous humming. The documents await your review. The chamber erupted in carefully regulated chaos. From his newly appointed office in the Botanical Affairs Division, Harold the Cactus had just submitted a 10,000-page analysis of the philosophical implications of photosynthesis as a form of civil disobedience. Admiral Hayes's fleet had taken scheduled maintenance to new heights. Every ship was undergoing simultaneous inspection, each documented with fractal levels of detail. The maintenance logs included footnotes with footnotes, and those footnotes had appendices. Dr. Santos's cultural exchange program had evolved into something unprecedented. She was now offering courses in advanced human paradox theory and quantum superposition of coffee break dynamics. The latest lecture series, Why Humans Say No Problem When There Clearly Is a Problem, a sociolinguistic analysis, had caused 3 logic-based species to request emergency philosophical counseling. Commander Wong's Strategic Compliance Division had achieved what they called peak bureaucracy, a state where the processing of their paperwork generated automatic requests for additional paperwork about the processing of the original paperwork. The system had become self-sustaining. We could try restricting their access to administrative channels, suggested a representative from the Digital Oversight Committee. Chen smiled serenely. I direct your attention to Regulation 12X9, which guarantees all species the right to document their compliance with regulations documenting their compliance with regulations documenting their compliance. She continued for exactly 17 minutes, each iteration perfectly cited. The assembly was facing an unprecedented crisis. The humans weren't breaking any rules, they were following all of them, simultaneously and perfectly. The very systems designed to control them had become their greatest weapons. In deep space, the HMS deliberate mistake was conducting what they called a routine cultural exchange exercise. They were teaching other species the human concept of work to rule, the art of following regulations so precisely that nothing actually gets done. The revolution had evolved beyond mere malicious compliance. It had become a form of performance art, each human action a carefully choreographed dance of bureaucratic perfection. They had turned the Assembly's own obsession with order against itself. High Counselor ZXYLTH watched in horror as their holographic displays showed the spread of human efficiency across the galaxy. Species after species was beginning to adopt human methods, finding a strange freedom in absolute compliance. Perhaps, they suggested desperately, we could implement a simplified regulatory system. Wonderful idea, Chen beamed. I prepared 42,897 proposals for simplification, each requiring full review under the current system before implementation. Shall we begin with Volume 1, Subsection A, the philosophical implications of reducing double paperwork to single paperwork, a quantum perspective? As the Assembly descended into perfectly documented disorder, a junior clerk discovered something terrifying in the archives. According to the oldest regulations, dating back to the founding of the Assembly, any species that achieved perfect compliance with all existing regulations would be eligible for a seat on the High Council. The humans hadn't just beaten the system. They had become the system. And somewhere in the depths of space, a human ship filed a request to classify malicious compliance as their species' official art form. The request was accompanied by a performance piece titled "Watch Us Follow Every Single Rule You Make, Extended Bureaucratic Remix." The galaxy would never be the same, and there was a form to prove it. The day the Galactic Assembly surrendered to perfect compliance began, like all historic moments, with a meeting about meetings. The Grand Chamber, designed to hold representatives from every known species, was filled to capacity. The air hummed with the sound of thousands of data pads simultaneously documenting every aspect of the proceedings. High Counselor ZXYLTH, their chromatophores, now permanently stuck in a shade of bureaucratic despair, stood at the central podium. Before them lay humanity's final masterpiece, a comprehensive proposal to reorganize the entire galactic government using what they called weaponized efficiency. Ambassador Sarachin approached the podium, Harold the Cactus's newest diplomatic brief, tucked under her arm. The document, Photosynthesis as a Metaphor for Governmental Growth, a study in bureaucratic botany, had somehow become the most cited text in galactic administrative history. Distinguished representatives, Chen began, her voice carrying the weight of carefully calculated victory, we've prepared a simple solution to our current situation. She paused, allowing the universal translators to catch up with the 17 layers of irony in her tone. The solution was anything but simple. The humans had discovered that by following every single regulation simultaneously, they had created a sort of bureaucratic singularity. The paperwork had become self-aware. Forms were filing themselves. Regulations were spontaneously generating new regulations in a cascade of infinite compliance. Admiral Hayes's fleet had achieved what they called administrative enlightenment, a state where their efficiency had become so perfect that it transcended traditional concepts of order and chaos. Their ships moved in formations that were simultaneously random and precisely calculated, filing flight plans that existed in a quantum superposition of all possible routes. Dr. Santos's cultural exchange program had evolved into something beyond anyone's comprehension. She was now teaching courses on the Zen of paperwork and quantum bureaucratic physics. Her latest seminar, Schrödinger's Format, Why All Document Formats Are Simultaneously Correct and Incorrect Until Observed by a Bureaucrat, had caused 3 different species to achieve bureaucratic nirvana. Commander Wong's Strategic Compliance Division had done the impossible. They had mapped the entire regulatory system of the galaxy and discovered that if every rule was followed perfectly, they formed a perfect fractal pattern of infinite complexity. The resulting visualization had been classified as both a work of art and a weapon of mass instruction. Our proposal is simple, Chen continued, pulling up a holographic display. We suggest implementing what we call organized chaos theory as the foundation of galactic governance. The display showed a new organizational structure that somehow made perfect sense, while being completely incomprehensible. It was like looking at a Mobius strip made of bureaucratic red tape. Under this new system, Chen explained, every species will be free to be as organized or disorganized as they wish, as long as they can provide the proper documentation for their chosen level of chaos. The assembly watched in fascination as she demonstrated the new approach. Humans would continue their perfect compliance, but now as performance art. Their efficiency would be classified as a form of cultural expression, protected under galactic law. Harold the Cactus, now serving as Earth's chief philosophy officer, had contributed a groundbreaking theory, the uncertainty principle of bureaucracy. The more precisely you follow the rules, the less predictable the outcome becomes. The revolution had succeeded not through force or resistance, but through embracing the system so completely that it had no choice but to evolve. The humans had turned bureaucracy into an art form, compliance into a dance, and chaos into order. As the assembly voted to adopt the new system, something extraordinary happened. The various species began to relax, finding freedom in the structured chaos. The logical absolutists discovered the joy of planned spontaneity. The hive mind collective learned to appreciate individual quirks within their unity. Admiral Hayes's fleet celebrated by performing a synchronized space ballet titled The Dance of the Filing Cabinets. Each ship moved in perfect formation while submitting random but impeccably documented course corrections. Dr. Santos unveiled her masterwork, a universal theory unifying all forms of bureaucratic expression, from the humble memo to the grand regulatory framework. She called it the Grand Unified Theory of Administrative Physics. Commander Wong's team had achieved something even more remarkable. They had created a system where efficiency and creativity could coexist, where order and chaos danced together in perfect harmony. And somewhere in the depths of space, a junior clerk discovered that all the paperwork they had been processing had arranged itself into a giant smiley face when viewed in 11-dimensional space. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Sometimes the most chaotic thing you can do is follow every rule perfectly. Sometimes the most perfect order comes from embracing a little chaos. As the new era dawned, Ambassador Chen sat in her office, sharing a cup of definitely not coffee with Harold the Cactus. On her desk lay the final piece of paperwork, Form INF-Infinity, Application for the Recognition of Bureaucratic Transcendence. She smiled as she signed it, knowing that the greatest revolution in galactic history had been won not with weapons or war, but with perfectly filed forms and a little bit of human chaos. The humans had changed the galaxy forever, and there were exactly 42,897 forms to prove it.